Hello and welcome back, and that's right, today I want to do a long overdue comparison video of two NASs I've talked about on the channel a decent enough, and that is this NAS up here, the QNAP TVS-h1288X, and I want to compare it against that NAS, the TVS-h874X. That X is very important. But before we go any further, a quick disclaimer. One, when I say this is long overdue, I say that because I am convinced I have made this video before, when both of these NASs have been talked about on the channel, particularly towards the end of 2022 when the 874 arrived, and I gave it all manner of praise for the sheer level of hardware it included. I was damned. I was so sure I'd made this comparison, so I apologise for anyone that was wondering when this video was going to come out. And full disclaimer, again, credit to Scott Weimer or Scott Weimer. I apologise if I've got your name wrong there. I was providing some support to him recently when he highlighted, not only was he comparing these two NASs, that we didn't really have a video on this. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be making this video. So if you're watching this, dude, thanks a lot. And you've already gone through this. I should say, for those that aren't aware, and I always mention this at the end of the videos, we do run a free advice section over on the blog. And again, you can choose to support us by using that service if you choose. But on top of that, going via Ko-Fi, you can go ahead and commission things from us. Again, I hate to plug our own services as much, but I only mention it in this video, which I rarely do, because I do supply 1-hour consultations. I know it's very self-pluggy, but it was via one of these, which generally I run, so I can be better informed of what people actually like in these things, that it came to my attention this video hadn't been made. So again, the plug out the way. Cheers for highlighting this to me, Scott. Let's crack on with this video. Now, a number of you might have seen my review last year of the 1288X. I did the video hardware review. On top of that, I did an article as well, and I heaped some serious praise on this device. It was probably one of the more game-changing systems from the brand when it was released, and ultimately, at that time, there was nothing competing with it. So you must have found, or maybe seen online, lots of articles and reviews, not just my own, that state just how superior this device is. And when you look at the pricing online for this device, I mean, again, whenever it is in stock, it sells out like that. Now, $2,700 is not a small chunk of change. It really isn't. But for an incredibly unique CPU in a graphical-enabled Xeon, which is already pretty rare in domestic NAS as it is, but in a desktop NAS, that is almost unheard of. And the sheer scale and scope of the hardware inside made it tremendously appealing, hence why, again, myself and others did heap quite substantial praise upon it. However, towards the end of 2022, the TVS-h874 arrived on the scene. The upgrade on the 872XT. This device here has got future-proof running all the way through it. And consequently, and understandably, a number of you that are about to drop somewhere in the region of $3,000 on a NAS without the hard drive, without the switches, it is understandable why there might be mixed messaging, myself included, as to which is better for your needs. Because I'm going to be straight with you right off the bat between these two solutions. Just to give you the TLDR, the TVS-h874X, in my opinion, is the better choice. It's not the only choice, and there are actually quite a lot of reasons why that 1288X may be suitable for a number of you. Indeed, in this video, we're going to be going through a substantial number of points why both of these NASs may be better than the other, for your different needs. But I'll tell you right now, by the end of this video, I think you'll hopefully agree with me that most users will go for the H874. If you have bought the 1288X, don't feel bad. It is an insane NAS. The 874 is not only quite hard to buy as well, but on top of that, it's only been around for about 4 to 5 months maximum. So again, if you've already got the 88X and you're thinking about whether to change lanes, don't bother, because you've already got yourself a banging solution as it is. Okay, so before we go into what makes them different and what makes one superior to the other, let's talk about what they've both got in common. Because regardless of whichever one of these two NASs you go for, you are guaranteed the following. Number one, unsurprisingly, you are getting a choice of QTS or QUTS. That is either the ext4 or the ZFS version of QNAP software with all of the applications and services. Everything from hybrid storage applications there, to collaboration applications there, to surveillance applications, to virtual machines, to containers, to high managed and high performing databases, to all of the features and services in first and third party, including AI services that you could hope for. Both of these systems allow you to choose between the Linux platform and the ZFS platform there, giving you the advantage of each. And again, there will be changes and upgrades such as Q-Tier, which is currently only available on the ext4 platform there. And the same thing goes officially if you want to go for QVR Pro with 8 camera licenses. That's only available on ext4, but there is a workaround if you download the package directly from the App Center on QNAP's own site, stuff like that. But ultimately, both of these systems arrive with the same software, and I would argue, with the exception of the sheer scale that you can use them, which I'll touch on later, you're going to get a very similar experience from either of these NASs when it comes to QNAP's own software. Next up, both of them arrive with integrated graphics processors there. So both of them have not only got very modern and very powerful processors under the bonnet, but on top of that, they've both got integrated graphics and not some middling, 300 megs knockaway Celeron gig. We are talking some serious graphical performance integrated into those processors. And on top of that, both of them support the use of graphics cards, but to a slightly different extent in terms of power delivery. More on that later on. Next up, they both support ECC memory. Now, I know a number of you are going to go, hold up. No, it doesn't. Well, it does, but there is a caveat massively attached to that we'll touch on later on. But they both technically support ECC memory. More on that later on. Next up, they both support the very latest and greatest SATA hard drive. So again, if you've been looking at Sega Iron Wolf, WD Red Pro, and that sort of stuff at like 22 TB, 24 TB around the corner, both of these support it, and with both of them arriving with those 4 main SATA bays of hard drive storage there, that is a lot of data storage to deal with there. Whether it is you're going to go for a simple 1-disk failover there, or you're going to be going for something like a RAID 6 or RAID 5, or even triple parity, thanks to that ZFS support there as well. And finally, both of them arrive with 3 years of manufacturer's warranty that can be extended to 5 years for the hardware, as well as effective product lifespan software warranty, which can extend considerably longer than that. So both of these are exceedingly well-made devices, and arguably both of them are some of the most powerful desktop NAS solutions in the market right now. There are a handful of more powerful ones in desktop form, but these change hands for £5,000 to £10,000 to £15,000. I'm looking at you, the U2 1290FX system. But that's enough about what they got in common. This video was never meant to be about things that are quite the same and quite like. We want to talk about what's different between them. And the first thing I want to talk about is the pricing between both of these two devices. Now, the pricing is all over the place in a way. So if we maximize this window here, if we go and make our way, I showed you earlier on the pricing there on B&H there for the 1288X there, 2,700. Now that is the full spec model there. It's got a couple of 10G ports on the rear. It's got the same super powerful CPU. It's arriving with quite a substantial amount of memory, 16 gig. At least it's a base model, not too shabby, but that is ECC memory off the bat. And for that sort of money, and again, when it is in stock, that's still pretty good for the kind of powerful hardware we're talking about. And indeed, when it is available on Amazon, you do see very similar pricing. There's even the 16-bay model that allows you to have an extra 4 bays of SATA storage there. Now, a number of you, particularly in the US, and again, thanks Scott for this, the TVS-h874, the i9 bells and whistles model, remember I said I'd mention the X, for some reason in the US has got insane pricing. And by insane, I mean insane good. By that, what I mean is, when you look at the TVS-h874, the X version, which has got 2 10GBE ports and an i9 12th gen processor, which, by the way, calls a lot of shots when it comes to the hardware down the line, For $3,100, remember the previous device we were talking about was changing hands for $2,700. You are getting a substantially more modern device. Again, there are pros and cons between comparing these CPUs that we'll touch on, but between the two of them, whether it is you're looking at B&H, exactly the same price, and we've looked at a few other websites, all of which are hitting that sweet spot price point wise, that is exceedingly good value. It is not as low as we've seen on the 1288X, but still nonetheless, it's really good for the hardware that we're going to talk about later on, with the added benefit, of course, that the 874 series is flexible to a point. It arrives in a 4-bay, a 6-bay, and an 8-bay configuration. It arrives with an i3, i5, i7, i9, and there's even a small Pentium model. So it does allow you to be a little bit more flexible about what you're getting for your money. But just bear in mind that when you scale down those CPUs, you end up with a CPU that's slightly less capable, which is then reflected on the rest of the hardware configuration. Also, only the i9X model has got 10 GBE, which can be a real pain. Again, hence the X. Overall, the point I'm making right now is when it comes to how much you're spending on a NAS, the 1288X, hands down, is the lower price. Everywhere I've looked when it is in stock, and even when it was formerly in stock using price monitors, it's the lower price NAS. But the TVS-h874X is the better value NAS, and also introduces customization in terms of the configuration for a number of you. Now, you may think I'm going on a little bit, but one, if you're about to drop $3,000 on a NAS, I would like to assume that you would like to spend a few extra minutes before you lay down the cash. So now we've talked about the money, let's talk a little bit about what we're getting for that Wonga. So now we've got the official page here on screen. We've got the 1288X on the left-hand side of the screen, the 874X on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, I know I'm somewhere at the bottom of the screen there. And straight away, CPU-wise, there's some real early-door stuff that's going to stand out to you. First and foremost, we've got a 6-core 12-thread processor versus a 16-core 24-thread processor there. That's insane differences. Now, if you were looking at these for virtualization, or even, dare I say, rather modest containers, which aren't going to be overly reliant on the hypervisor locking away the access to the bare metal, between these two, you've just got more to play with and flexibility on that i9. Now, it is using those more efficient E-cores, the 8 E-cores and the 8 primary cores, but there's still no avoiding that thanks to it being 24-thread allowing you to assign virtual processors, there's a tremendous degree of flexibility in what this CPU can be assigned to, either dynamically or manually. Now, moving forward, we can talk about those graphics between the two of them, and I will say, between the two of them, the graphical processor, the integrated graphics on that Xeon W processor there are actually the tiniest bit higher. Between the two of them, you would assume the Intel Core would have the higher graphical capabilities, but it's actually the Xeon W. The difference is how it bursts, because at a base level, they're near enough identical. It's only in burst when that matters, but it all kind of counts for naught when the scale of that i9 is so substantially better. And you would have to have a particular singular use case scenario, ergo that you would have to be using a substantial amount of the CPU resources like for like in a single operation, not assigning to separate ones, where the graphical peak of the Xeon W inside the 1288X would be fully realised in a way that it would surpass that of the i9 overall. The i9, due to that breadth of utilization and assignment, means that even though the Xeon W has an edge, its edge only matters for large singular tasks that are going to be occupying a substantial percentage of the system resources. Now, I said I'd touch on this earlier on, but it's worth touching on very specifically here, and let's talk ECC memory. Now, why is that relevant? Because Error correct encode or error correction memory has its place in a number of different industries. Whether you are in the banking sector, large-scale databases that are low volume files but exceedingly high frequency, where data inconsistencies in even warm but particularly cold storage cannot be tolerated, or if you are working as the main site operation backup system for a multitude of other servers, ECC memory, alongside a bunch of other data consistency and data integrity checks, is largely industry standard. Now, the 1288X throughout this video, one key takeaway I want you to take about this system is it is a friggin' workhorse. Between the two of them, the 1288X has the most consistent, sustained performance for database utilization and backups. What I mean by that, although both of these systems can more than handle the available range of network connections they arrive with and expanded later on, and as well as internal operations being managed, when it comes to sustained use, there's a reason Xeon processors are the de facto lovey-dovey choice of the data center. They just commit to sustained periods of performance, and that is very true here. So that CPU in conjunction with ECC memory makes a lot of sense. Earlier on, I heaped praise on that 16 gig of memory at that price point with the rest of the configuration, and I do stand by that. But there's still no avoiding that when the 874X arrives with 64 gig, that is maxing out the maximum memory there, that is something to behold. Now, we have to acknowledge 64 gig as a maximum is still lower than the potential maximum 128 gig assigned available via the slot on that QNAP there on the 1288X there. And again, depending on the file operation, depending on the system operations, more memory may be paramount to you. And also, it's not ECC memory inside the 874X, is it? Which is super annoying. But that CPU, we've got the wrong CPU, we'll bring that one there. If we go down to it, we can clearly see that it does support ECC memory. If we chose to, we could just go out and buy ECC memory, you know, take out that 64 gig of standard SODIMM, sell it off, and grab ourselves some ECC. Now, one might argue, one might ask, why the hell didn't QNAP just include ECC memory? Well, a few reasons. One, ECC memory's pricey. Why do you think there's only 16 gig in the other NAS? But secondly, there are continued memory shortages. This has been going on since the very end of 2020 and certainly established in 2021. We've seen memory modules and just effectively the technology behind semiconductors not only reach a breaking point in terms of availability, but also price spikes quite substantially. We're seeing an increasing trend on a lot of NAS systems to pre-solder, and this goes for PC utilization as well, to pre-solder memory directly to controller boards, because one, is more cost effective, and two, it ends up being more efficient by the systems. So I can understand why Synology didn't put ECC memory in, but at least it supports it. And also ECC memory, although it's in the 888X and is a plus, I don't think should be a tipping point for most users in of itself. We could talk about the storage. We have to, of course, acknowledge that there is the additional 4 SATA bays there on the 1288X, which allows you to create that wonderful 3-tier storage system of hot, warm and cold storage with regards to the internal NVMe's in conjunction with the SATA hard drive SSD base, and then the SATA hard drive base is really advantageous, with the 874X only arriving with the main SATA base and 2 NVMe bays inside. We have to at least acknowledge that on a hardware level there is that there's a greater flexibility available to us there. But then we have to talk about something that arguably, at least as far as I'm concerned, is one of the biggest arguments that the H874X is the superior NAS for most users. PCIe Gen 4. Now, what that means is the M2 NVMe slots that are inside these systems, as well as the traditional PCI slots, have a substantial difference. There are more slots for PCIe cards inside the 1288X, but all of them are Gen 3. Gen 3 per lane is 1000 megs, so times 8, would be 8,000, times 4 is 4,000, and times 4, another 4,000 there, which is great stuff. We've also got the M2 NVMe bays, if we scroll down and find them wherever they are. The M2 NVMe bays that are located inside this system are also Gen 3 times 4, so 4,000 megs there. So we've got some decent performance, right? The 1288X. Why am I ragging on it for? Well, that Gen 4 effectively doubles the bandwidth per lane. That means that CPU lane there, the PCIe CPU lane, is 4 times 16. That is a potential for 32,000 megabytes per second bandwidth, which is insane. And we'll talk a little bit about what you can do with that in a moment. But there's also, just for the sheer hell of it, a 4 times 4 as well. So again, another 8,000 megs lane there, which again is equal to the best lane on the 1288X for an upgrade card, be it GPU card, be it network upgrade, be it performance upgrade card like a Mustang, or utilising it for storage upgrade cards. On top of that, the M2 NVMe are also Gen 4 times 4. So your WD Black 850X, your Seagate Fire CUDA 530, real high performance, 7,000 megs plus SSDs. And this has 2 lanes inside. So yes, there are more storage bays in terms of those 4 SATA ones inside the 1288X, which again, I still maintain it's a great friggin' NAS. But with this released at the end of 2022, the 874X in the i9 version, you cannot compete with the abilities of those extra lanes. To put that into perspective, when you look at upgrade cards from QNAP, and remember they support Mellanox, Intel, and a bunch of third-party cards as well, both of these systems, they've got cards for Gen 4 that allow 2 more Gen 4 M2 NVMe's and 2 more 10G ports as an upgrade card there. You can just go ahead and add that card to one of those available bays inside that system. You've just added 2 more superfast M2s and 2 more 10GBE ports, but it doesn't stop there. Then you've got 25 gig fiber upgrade cards there. Again, 25 GBE each. They've got 2 different cards of that, of the 100 gig card upgrade as well. There are just an insane amount of these upgrade cards in the QM2 series from QNAP there, each of which, although there are Gen 3 versions out there, are nowhere near as advanced in terms of their performance, bandwidth and controllers as they are in the Gen 4 version. And if you take these Gen 4 cards and you put them inside a Gen 3 system, you have to factor in that Gen 3 will automatically downgrade them. So, par example, some of these cards are Gen 3 times 8. Some of them are Gen 3 times 16 for the higher performing cards. But if you put those into the Gen 3 system, even though they're a Gen 4 card, it will cap each lane to 1,000 megs. And you'll never really be able to fully utilize what those cards are capable of doing. So not only does the base level system already have more memory, a more customizable and flexible CPU off the bat, better PCIe upgrades in terms of cards available that you can make the most of, and super fast M2 NVMe base by comparison, all of that, and remember the price point I mentioned earlier on at $3,199, which isn't a small sum of money. I'm not stupid. We've all counting the pennies at the minute, but it's no avoiding that if you're going to invest a bit of money in this system, the price difference relative to one another, it's only about 500 nicker, and that 500 quid gets you a huge amount of flexibility between these systems overall. Now, I feel like I've been really waving the flag there for the 874X, right? Let's rein it in a little bit and talk about the 1288X. Because in terms of default port and connectivity, that's when we've got to swing things back to that system. In terms of ports and connectivity, we've already talked about it. They've both got 10 gig ports on the rear, 2 ports each, and it has to be highlighted that the 1288X arrives with 10 GBE guaranteed, whereas the 874 only has, as mentioned, the 10G port on the Xi9 version. So if you go for any of those other configurations, you've got to get your 10G elsewhere and get it as an upgrade card. Now, between the two of them, they both also have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, but the 1288X arrives with 4 2.5G ports and those 2 10Gs. And thanks to SMB multi-channel you're able to really create a nice active workflow, both connecting to a local switch, but also taking advantage of that enhanced SMB multi-channel and other methodology to bond ports together between your host system and it to really improve some of the performance both to and from the system for content creation, or again accessing things like virtual machines and larger scale editing. Now, you've got 2 ports of 2.5 GBE on the 874, and you've got those 2 10G ports, and you could have added more ports. But there's still no avoiding that if multiple network connections off the bat is important to you, you're going to get more out of that 1288X. Remember, it's the workhorse of the 2 systems there overall. Also, when we're looking at the ports and connections of these 2 systems, it's worth highlighting between them that the 1288X can be upgraded with Thunderbolt. You can get a QNAP Thunderbolt 3 upgrade card, and it allows you to add Thunderbolt connectivity, direct Thunderbolt connectivity with the system. And for those in an editing suite that want to have a NAS that not only has a tremendous high performance connection to the local area network via an intelligent switch over 10G, 25G and even 100G, but at the same time have a local connected connection there via Thunderbolt for up to 2 editors, that's great news. And remember, there's multiple PCIe slots on that 1288X, so the potential for more ports is available. Now, the 874X currently does not support a Thunderbolt upgrade card, which for me is weird. Because remember, this is the system that's arriving with an Intel Core 12 Gen. That is where we enter Thunderbolt 4 territory. That's where we enter USB 4 territory. Now, whether it is because the QNAP hasn't got a license to produce a card for this system, or that they're going to release a Thunderbolt 4 version of this, which I think is spectacularly likely, we don't 100% know. But still, nonetheless, if introducing Thunderbolt interactive workflow in your active editing suite for post-production and more is on the cards for you, chances are the 1288X might be the better option to deploy straight off the bat. But there's still no avoiding the question mark that we might see a Thunderbolt 4 upgrade either wholesale or as an upgrade card down the line for the 874, which I think is spectacularly likely between these 2 systems. So, what have we learned in this comparison? Have you sort of worked out which one's best for you? Let's summarize. Now, going by my notes. If we look at the 1288X, we can talk about its strengths. 1, better pricing. It's a lower price point, and remember, it arrives with that 10 GBE. More default storage off the bat. It's got that triple tier system straight off the bat. They're both hugely expandable devices, but that one's got 3 tiers straight off the bat. It has a technically better height in graphical utilization. It just can't be as spread as thinly or as diversely as its competitor. It is the workhorse system thanks to a workhorse Xeon CPU for sustained performance overall. It has more network connections, the extra 2.5G off the bat. It has ECC memory off the bat. It can be scaled up to 128 gig in memory, and it can be upgraded to Thunderbolt. Does that sound like music to your ears? Then chances are that's the NAS for you. But for me personally, the strengths of the 874 make it possibly a better choice overall in 2023 moving forward. The flexible pricing allowing you to go for different configurations. Just better hardware value overall. Look at those price points we mentioned earlier on. It is PCIe Gen 4, which for me is an absolute deal breaker moving forward in terms of future-proofing and upgrading and knowing your storage is going to be super fast later and having a CPU that can juggle it along the way. It's also the lower power consuming of the 2 devices, which is really strange to say given its core utilization, but it has a smaller PSU compared with the 2 systems there, and also the CPU is just a little bit more efficient and it doesn't have the same peak burst from what I understand. Next up, it has more threads and more cores for you to assign either manually or that the system do its job in order to assign it. And if you're looking at either one of these for your Plex Media Server or your Jellyfin or MB and the like, you are definitely going to get a better experience out of the TVS-h874 because 1, it has that better diversity of its hardware architecture within the CPU, which means it can assign multiple encode decodes or even up to 8K playback, something we showed at Christmas, which is hopefully linked in the description below. We did 8K testing on that NAS. But on top of that, even if you're going to run standard VMs, you can assign so much of the capabilities of that processor, graphical or otherwise, to individual VMs. And of course, there is the question mark of Thunderbolt 4, which I think is going to be a foregone conclusion on this device down the line. I can't guarantee it, but it seems like an absolute no-brainer to me that they're either going to release a Thunderbolt 4 version or at least the scalability and ability to upgrade the system. And remember, because it's PCIe Gen 4, you've got all of those lovely upgrades that are going to be made possible in the QM2 card series and otherwise that will have their wings ever so slightly clipped if you look at them on the 1288X. Ultimately, that's why for me, the 874 just makes that little bit more sense. But I'm not you, and you're not me. Which one do you think's better for you? Have you found this comparison helpful? I really hope you have. I apologise that it's overran ever so slightly, but this is a lot of money, and that when you're looking at a device like this, you want minimum 5 years out of this, probably closer to 10. And both of these are very future-proof devices. One, I would argue, slightly more future-proof than the other. So forgive me for this video overrunning, but I'm trying to save you a bit of money down the line, and I hope that helps. If you need further help, as mentioned, get ready for the self-plugin. Utilize the free advice section here on our website. It's the blue button on the right hand side of the screen. Get rid of that horrible advert. And if you go down there, we've got all of the forums that we recommend here on the line for people to go for free advice, both official and unofficial. On top of that, you can utilize our free advice section here, or you can pay for Fast Track where you'll get a response within 24 hours. Alternatively, you can contact me or Eddie in a number of different ways, either on our Discord, or you can utilize Discord there at the top of every page, or you can use the free community support forum, Ask NAScompares, which is, again, an open forum community to answer your questions. And finally, you can head over to Ko-Fi, where you can either get that Fast Track, you can do a Zoom consultation where we can, make some recommendations on your setup, or scan for your ports and open ports and vulnerabilities on your system remotely, or do more. You can find out more on those pages. And otherwise, if you have found this video helpful, then please use the links in the description to take you to the likes of Amazon, to eBuyer, to Scan, to CCO Online, B&H, you name it. But again, only if you found the video helpful, and only if you're going to shop at those stores anyway. If that's true, please use the links in order to go to those sites. It costs you nothing extra, and anything you buy, and I mean anything, results in a small kickback coming back to here to NAScompares. It's literally just me and Eddie doing this, and it allows us to keep continuing doing what we do, making great content, giving out free advice where possible, and writing more and more articles. And it allows you to positively support content creators in the most passive way possible. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a fantastic week, and do let me know which one of these two NASs worked out best for you in the comments.